So, the word self care sometimes makes us think that we're doing it alone, that we're not part of a community or a web of caring. And for me, when I'm talking about self care, I like to be reminded that we start with the self, but we're also embedded in circles of relationships from our family and our aunties and our communities, and even within nature and spirit. So, for me, self care is one part of an interconnected whole. But really, sometimes self care is about helping us feel better. And so sometimes you might go for a walk and that helps you feel better. But sometimes you might want to have a bite of chocolate and that makes you feel better. So for me, there's like an ABCs of self care. A is the awareness. I have to know myself. I have to know when I get stressed, do I start biting my nails, or do I get a stomach ache, or do I have headache? What do I start to do when I'm experiencing stress? And stress can be good things too, like relationships, things like that. And it can also be hard things. It could be tasks that you have tomorrow, whatever. It doesn't matter. But what do I do when I'm experiencing that stressor? And how do I take care of myself? So that's the awareness piece, or the A, is just knowing myself and my body. So that's the part that we all have tools that we can use at that level. So maybe you write in a journal. That's a tool of awareness that helps me go, wow, I'm really stressed about this. Our dreams are a tool of awareness. So you might pay attention to your dreams. When you wake up in the morning, take a minute and jot them down. Your daydreams, what do you dream about or think about? Daydreaming, you might get in trouble for it in class, but it's not a bad thing. It's actually a tool of awareness and of thinking about what we're visioning or what we want. So the A, or the awareness, there are lots of things. You might dance your awareness. You might sing it. You might drum it. Maybe you do prayer. Maybe you would go on the mountain. But how we cultivate an awareness of ourself in relation to things happening to us is really important. So there's lots of different ways that you might do that. And if something doesn't work for you, try something different. The B of self-care for me is balance and boundaries. There are two B's in there. We need balance. We all have different roles. We're daughters. Maybe you also have a job. Maybe you have other responsibilities, looking after siblings or whatever. And we need balance in that. If we're doing too much of anything, that's when we start to be stressed and we see our health suffer. So how do we seek balance? What are the things we do? Well, sometimes I say visualize it, and I actually do a collage. I do it myself. I do it with girls I work with, where we think about all the roles we have and how we want to be. So sometimes we get out of balance, like I'm really studying lots, and so my mental is woo, I'm writing and I'm studying, but I forget about the physical. I'm eating chips and sour cream every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So we just get out of balance. We need help sometimes to bring that back in. Now I want to say something a little bit about the word balance, because sometimes it feels like it's impossible to achieve balance. So I call it a perfectly imperfect balance, meaning that we're just trying to find, it's like riding a skateboard or a wave. Your core is engaged and you're kind of noticing that you're going a little to the left and you're going to fall. You're going a little to the right, or coming forward or backward. So you kind of want to be thinking about that core, which is that A, that awareness. But the balance is about all the things that are hitting us, the waves, or if it's skateboarding, the bumps you're going over, or I like to dirt bike, maybe it's what's coming up ahead, what's the trees, what do I need to do? So if we get off balance, we literally will fall off. In addition to the balance that we talked about, we need boundaries. That's the other B. So for me, when I think of boundaries, I think of how do I say yes to things I want to do, and that links to the balance, but how do I also say no? And so boundaries are really important part of our wellness and our self-care. So for me, sometimes I say yes out of my feelings for that person. Like my friend says, will you do this with me? And I really want to be with them. I don't necessarily want that activity. So sometimes we end up in situations where we're doing too much or taking on too much just because of our connections to people and not wanting to disappoint them. So part of having boundaries is putting ourselves in that equation and recognizing, like, how to say no with conditions. Like, I would love to do that with you, but I need this and this to be done first for myself. I've got, commitments to my family or to work or whatever, and so I can't fit that in. So how to say no and maintain relationship, I think is one of the things that is a life lesson. I would say trying to find ways to have that ability to set boundaries for yourself. Sometimes I say have a buddy. I have a friend sometimes who we joke about it, but before we say yes to things and overcommit, we say we'll talk to the other person about it. So it's like you have a committee to give your yes to be a part of something, or your no. So sometimes you might need to talk it through with a friend. Sometimes you might have to role play it. But boundaries are really important, because when we don't have them, people will keep adding more and more, or assume that in my case, Natalie loves to do that. She could do more and more and more. And so pretty soon you realize, wow, my shoulders are carrying a lot. So the B of self-care is just really that, having that ability to have balance in our own life of all the roles and commitments we have and the things that we love, but also things we have to do, and then the boundaries between that. So the C of the ABCs of self-care is connection and community. When we're stressed, we tend to isolate. Or even when we're with people, we're not actually truth-telling. We're not letting them know what's really going on. We can get really good at masking. For me, the C is, can I be myself and in connection? And when we get stressed, we might isolate in lots of different ways. And that's when sometimes our coping might not be always the most healthy for us. We might have other strategies to disconnect us from people and places. And so things that help us connect to people, to know that we might need to reach out, to say, hey, I could use some time. So that's the C for me, is that when we get into trouble or we start to isolate, and for me, connection might just be talking to a friend about your day. I'm really starting to feel stressed. It doesn't mean that you go to formal routes, although I do think counseling can be helpful, family can be helpful, talking to elders. But what are the ways that you reach out to others? Because sometimes I'd like to believe we're all part of communities of caring, and that someone is seeing you right now and knows that you're struggling, notices you're a bit quieter in this class today, notices you're a bit spacey. But if that's not happening, sometimes we have to create that community for ourselves, stretch a little bit and say, ask for a bit of time or space from somebody just to talk about what's going on or to brainstorm other things.